Stopping or changing existing habit. In yesterday's video, I covered the 4 parts of a habit loop, which hopefully you've remembered as being cue, craving, response, reward. And today I'm going to cover how you can approach an existing habit with a view to stopping doing it or doing it less of, taking into account those 4 sections. This is covered again in more depth on the habits section on the Learn tab on the app. So for the cue of the thing you're wanting to stop doing or do less of, we want to make it more hidden. So we need to have us think, stop, and actually take stock and think, what is it? What's the first thing that creates that chain of thought in my head that leads to me doing that particular thing? Is it that it's a certain time of day? Is it that we're in a certain place? So we arrive somewhere, or we see something, or we're just doing something that makes us think of that thing? Is it how we're feeling? Do we do this thing when we feel happy, sad, annoyed, irritated, hungry, tired, whatever it may be? Is it that we've just done something else? Do we finish one thing and then automatically do the next thing, kind of piggybacking that existing habit? Is it some other reminder? Is it what someone says? What is that first thing that creates that, again, chain of thought that starts that sequence of events? And how can we make it so we're exposed to that thing less? How can we make it so we don't feel that way as much? How can we make it so we don't see that thing, go to that place? There may be only so much we can do with that, but there probably is something. We can make it so we're exposed to that cue somewhat less. And if we do that, potentially in conjunction with some of the later sections of the habit loop, we're less likely to do it. So make the cue hidden. For the craving, how can we make it less desirable? So for the moment, when we think of doing it, we really want to do it. How can we make it so we want to do it a bit less? Could we make it so it's a bit harder to do? Could we make it so that we remind ourselves of the downsides of it? The number of people smoking went down considerably when they introduced health warnings in text on the packs, and went down further when they introduced pictures of blackened lungs, because you pick up the pack and it just takes away enough of that craving for you to want to do that thing. How can we do the equivalent? How can we make it less desirable? For the response, how can we make it harder? How can we make that doing of the thing that we want to stop doing or do less of harder to do? Maybe the thing isn't there. We don't have that food stuff in the house. We don't make it so easy for us to engage in whatever behavior it is. How can, if our friend came to us and said, how can I make it harder for me to do X, Y, Z? What would you say to them? And finally, for the reward, how can we make it less fulfilling? If normally at the end of having done that thing, we go, oh, that's brilliant, and we love it. How can we make it a bit less so? Could we remind ourselves of the downside? Could we somehow bring the downside a little bit more into the present? If the only downside is in 6 months' time, then we're still going to find it rewarding. If the downside is more immediate, we're going to find it less so. So, in summary, for the thing you want to stop doing or do less of, how can you make it so the cue, the thing that creates that chain of events, is a bit more hidden? How can we make it so we desire it less, that it's harder to do and less fulfilling?